Build It Green is presenting this webinar, Part 2, Cornerstone Concepts for Quality Property Management, on behalf of the Energy Network, which is a local government organization created by the CPUC that provides resources and assistance to homeowners, businesses, and public agencies planning energy efficiency upgrades serving the California region, Southern California region. These services include community education and outreach, such as these webinars, rebate and incentive offerings, attractive financing terms, and tools to help identify contractors that have been trained in energy efficiency. Additional resources help homeowners take the next steps towards saving energy. The Energy Network has a great program for multifamily property owners, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about this towards the end of our webinar. As we've heard in Part 1 of John Wilhoit's webinar series, which focused on the complexities of property management, that property presentation is imperative and that controlling utility expenses is an important factor, we learned that there are ways to keep tenants happy with your property. Today, John will address the ways that property managers can keep renters satisfied. This happens with management training, smart landscaping choices, and innovation that starts in our major metropolitan areas. Landscaping is a particularly timely topic as California continues to struggle with the worst drought in the state's history. If your renters are millennials, they are particularly sensitive to energy and water conservation, and they will form their first impressions about the property based sometimes on your landscaping choices. In addition, innovative water conservation and energy efficiency solutions like passive heating, solar water heating, electric charging stations for your cars, drain water heat recovery systems, and living roofs, which are now part of building codes, have all begun to take hold in our cities and are making their way into all parts of the state. Residents are not only soon to become better educated about resource conservation, but they will begin to look for properties that reflect these values back to them. As a property owner, you're in the business of creating homes for your tenants. You can offer a healthy environment that they'll cherish while at the same time saving yourself maintenance costs and setting an example for the larger community. Today's presenter, John Wilhoit of Multifamily Insight, is also president of Wilhoit Investment Network, LLC, an owner and asset manager of apartments, condominiums, and townhomes. His career is focused on high-volume, large-scale multifamily communities, including market rate and mixed finance developments. He has previously held positions with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Apartment Investment Management Company, and the Maryland Housing Fund. John also happens to be the co-founder of Powerhouse Leadership Academy, a live weekly program that assists property management teams with increasing their property management fees and expanding new business development while controlling expenses, which some of you guys in the audience might find very beneficial. The live weekly academy focuses on maximizing net operating income and increasing the net asset value of property management companies through its leading edge, GRACE, which stands for Growing Revenue and Control Expense Strategy. Multifamily Insight is John's blog that provides his perspective on the world of multifamily acquisitions, management, and investing. If you've enjoyed Part 1 and you look forward to Part 2, join us for Part 3 of John's presentation. I'll offer a little bit more information about that at the end of this webinar. But with that, I would like you all to join me in welcoming John Wilhoit. John?
Hello, hello. Thank you everyone for being here. Today we've got 3 topics to cover. One is on management training, another related to landscaping, and the third related to innovation. So everything I'm going to talk about today is specific to multifamily. Some of the things, though, are also, well, I shouldn't say also, they always relate to property management and to rental housing. So rental housing doesn't have to be exclusively multifamily, right? It can be a single family or a duplex. But when we start talking about multifamily, we're talking about units that are 5 or more contiguous units, or those that are, for instance, 3 duplexes that are adjacent would be considered a multifamily property because it's more than 5, right? But if you have 5 single-family homes or 5 duplexes that are kind of scattered, that wouldn't be considered multifamily because the management and the location are both not contiguous. But with respect to our discussion today, everything applies to rental property, whether it's a single family, a duplex, a 5-plex, or a 150-unit multifamily asset. Most everything we're discussing related to property management and cost controls can be related to rental property of just about any size. But our focus here is residential property management. And we're starting with the first topic being why management training is important. Because many of you here have professional managers. Some on this call are professional property managers. But then there's a handful of people that try to what we call self-manage. So you have properties, you're attempting to manage them yourself as an aside, and it's not something that you do on a full-time basis. So when you're not managing on a full-time basis, and it is just a part-time thing, then there's a lot of things that slip through the cracks. But, for example, you can't let fair housing law slip through the cracks, right? I mean, it's imperative whether you're releasing a property directly yourself as the property manager, or you are a property management company, or if you're using a professional property management company, fair housing is just an absolute. You have to know the rules. You have to follow the law. You can't discriminate based on the fair housing rules that are instigated on a statewide level and on a national level. So when we talk about management training, you know, if you were to hire a management company, you would want to know if they are following fair housing regulations and if they are implementing that per the state regs that are necessary. So when it comes to property management, there are some things that are just an absolute. Fair housing is one of those things. So what's gained by having quality or continuous property management, meaning we're staying abreast of the laws as they are implemented by the state and federal government, is that you have continuity. And that's one of the things that's really important for your residents and for your operation. And that continuity really means staying on message. And staying on message, if we're talking about a multifamily property, means that every single person that comes on property as a potential resident is hearing the same thing, irrespective of who they're talking to as a property representative. And if you have more than one property, then that same message should be clear and the same, or similar, I should say, across your entire portfolio. And that comes from, again, quality property management, right? Management training, where you have a core message and then ancillary messages that fold underneath it that are perhaps property specific, but there's still a continuity across your organization. So it could be a 48-unit multifamily property, but yet everyone, again, that is a potential resident needs to hear the same things. They need to know what the rules are. They need to know what the expectations are, you know, and all of those come under the umbrella of property management. Another thing that comes with property management is updates that include best practices. So that's one of the things we attempt to do on Multifamily Insight, my blog, is just present on a weekly basis another potential usage for property owners, managers, and investors of best practices within multifamily. Sometimes it's just a different way to do make-ready. Sometimes we talk about a different method to address crime. Other times we'll opine about what property managers are doing at large institutional property management companies and how those same types of practices can be applied to your property at the local level. So management training requires continuity. It requires use of best practices, which means you have to stay current, right? I mean, you can't just go away for 2 years and come back. If we did that with our cell phone, every last one of us wouldn't know how to use the newest cell phone if we hadn't seen one for as short a period of 2 years, because things change so rapidly. So in real estate, things change a little slower, of course, but yet over time there is a gradual increase in the amount of regulation, and the amount of things that are required of us to run our property at its highest and best use. So how do we run our property at highest and best use? And the way we do it through Multifamily Insight is through a acronym we call GRACE, and that is growing revenue and controlling expenses. And that's also done through management control. So management control goes back to the continuity of the message, the continuity of the training of the people that are on staff. But GRACE, growing revenue and controlling expenses, are really two sides of the same coin, right? I mean, we can't do one without the other very effectively, because growing revenue is fine unless expenses are growing faster. Then it doesn't matter how fast you're growing revenue, the revenue will be overcome by increases in expenses. So we have to do both in concert with one another. We have to have a focus on growing revenue and consistently at the same time focus on controlling expenses. And when we can do both of those, then we have a significant or a higher probability of increases in net operating income. And why that's so important is because net operating income, no matter what measure you use, is the primary factor of how people value multifamily assets. The higher the NOI, the higher the value of the asset. So revenue is important, controlling expenses is important. More important than that is growing NOI, growing revenue while controlling expenses, increases NOI, and with that, you're increasing the value of the assets under management or those that you own. And Leah, that's our first stanza for why property management is important. Should I continue?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so moving on to slide 2, why landscaping is an asset to the property and for property management. Landscaping, so many of us take for granted because it's just kind of there. You know, hopefully we hope that it's green, right? But it's not always green. But what landscaping really does for a property more than anything else is it offers an aesthetic, and with that, it offers a sense of place. So when people are accustomed to a particular building looking a particular way, if you were to remove the landscaping, it would no longer be the same place. So the landscaping that's there is part of the property presentation, it's part of the personality of the asset, and with that, it's an important piece of why people reside in a certain place. Granted, not always, certainly, but very often, landscaping has a direct effect on values, on perception, on the way that people feel about an asset. And I know we're talking about qualitative things here at the moment, but these are all things that our residents, our customers, think of subconsciously when they're talking or when they're thinking about landscaping. So another thing that landscaping does for an asset is it really is a method of controlling the environment. And what I mean by that is not so much the environment as you're thinking of it at the moment, but the environment with respect to how people interact with the property. So we don't put thorny bushes, whatever that thorny bush is, next to entryways, right? Because we know that it will, at the end of the day, be a negative. Kids will get, cut, and clothing can get torn, etc. So that's part of controlling the environment. But there are other areas where you may wish to put thorny bushes. For example, a storm drain, which really people don't need to be in the first place. So whereas that thorny bush has no place next to an entry door, it does have a place in an area of the property where we want people to stay away from. So that's just one example of how we can control the environment at a property using a single type of plant that belongs in one place, doesn't belong in another. Some plants are seasonal, of course. Others have a long lifespan, and others a very short lifespan. We all know about the lilies we see in spring that are not here for the rest of the year. But when we're talking about landscaping, if you utilize it appropriately, it's going back to what we said earlier, it offers additional sentiment about how people perceive the property. So it really is an asset to the property. It really does bring value. But when we talk about just dollars and cents, landscaping can also be a cost saver. Now, this is, of course, regionally appropriate. But there are certain types of plants that thrive in certain environments, but just because they thrive doesn't mean they're the best plant for that area. So professional advice really is suggested here, not just a landscaper that knows how to cut grass and put trees in, but someone that has real training in the area of what is appropriate landscaping. And we're not trying to replace grass with rocks or with cut-up tires that have been colored into a green color to look like grass. But what really is appropriate, what is cost saving for the region that you're in, whether it's Northern or Southern California, or Florida for that matter, right? Indiana has a completely different seasonal adjustment to consider than does even Chicago, even though they're both in the Midwest. So looking at cost saving is really region appropriate. And then, measuring the moisture in the ground, not only on a particular day, but over the course of a year, different levels of measurement of different levels of moisture in the ground will, what's the word I'm looking for, will have a direct impact on the type of plants that can be planted, but not only that, it will have a direct impact on what type of watering is necessary. So some plants, even though they're aesthetically pleasing, they just cost too much to run because of the trimming required and the constant use of water. Whereas other plants that would perhaps have the same level of coverage, and they may cost more to plant initially, if they have lower maintenance costs over the course of their lifetime, then that's likely a positive, right? So we're not trying to skimp and put in fewer plants, or what we're really trying to do is put in the appropriate type of planting that are not only appropriate for the region, but also those that are most cost effective over the lifetime of that planting. So again, we're talking about more than just grass here. We really are talking about appropriate usage of landscaping and landfill that has not only a positive effect on the property in terms of how they look aesthetically, but also in terms of what they cost over time. And the last point I have with respect to landscaping, and something that could potentially have a nice yet small positive impact on revenue, is for any property that has patios, there's an opportunity, or I should say patios or balconies, there's an opportunity in many instances to install what's called a garden box. And with that garden box, it may be 12 to 18 inches wide. It can be anywhere from 3 feet long to 6 feet long. And they're very inexpensive. But just adding that garden box to that patio or balcony is another opportunity to increase revenue, because for everyone that requests a garden box, you can ask an additional amount of rent per month for having that there. And that gives everyone their little bit of piece of the earth, as it were, where they can plant what they'd like, whether it's just parsley or seedlings or flowers. But that's just a small aside with respect to landscaping that gives people an opportunity to put their hands in the dirt and at the same time potentially increase revenue for the property just a little bit. And that is the second point for today's conversation, why landscaping is an asset to the property and to property management. You ready to go to the last point?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And the last point is related to innovation and recognizing that in many instances, innovation begins within the 24-hour cities. So let me cover that with a little bit more detail. And let's start by suggesting that there are multiple market categories. And we're talking about geography now when it comes to multifamily assets. So if you're looking at market categories, we would start with what's called the urban core. And the urban core begins with, very often, wherever City Hall is. Yes, it can be a different marker, but whether you're talking about San Francisco or Chicago, in both instances, in the last 2 years, those areas within 2 miles of City Hall have increased in population by more than 20,000 persons. So those places are the core of the urban area, the urban core. Those areas within 1 or 2 miles of City Hall in major cities. So we have the urban core surrounded by the urban marketplace or the urban city. And I'm not talking about a donut so much, a round sphere, but we can use that as a placeholder for what these areas represent. Urban core first, surrounded by urban, surrounded by suburban areas. And once we depart from the suburban areas, we call those areas tertiary markets. The tertiary market may be attached to a major metropolitan, but it's not in the major metropolitan. It may be in the same county. It may be an adjacent county. And the people that live in tertiary markets very often work within the city, within the suburban or urban areas of the city, but they don't live in the city. And then once we leave the tertiary market, we're in what's called frontier markets. Those areas that are really a little bit beyond commute time for being within the city. So when we think about innovation and things that permeate the multifamily marketplace, very often they start in the urban core for the reasons that I'm about to provide you. But then they encompass the urban, suburban, tertiary, and frontier markets over time. So let me give you an example. This week I'm in New York City, and I'm at a big convention. It's a book convention, and I'm at the convention center here. And yesterday I was very thirsty. So yesterday I just bought a bottle of water and went about my business. And I didn't really realize it until I was leaving the counter that I had just spent $5 on a single bottle of water. I mean, that's not something that I do very often, because when I'm in my home market and I go to the big box store, I'm spending $5 for a case of water, right? But I'm in the urban core. I'm in the urban area. So what does that mean? Number one, that means that there's scarcity. This is not a place where I need to or would care to purchase a case of water. I really only needed one. Unfortunately, it was the same price point as the case, but I didn't care, right? I'm thirsty. There's nowhere to go for other fluids. I needed that bottle of water on my person for the day. So scarcity is something that occurs in urban markets. So what happens when we have scarcity? When there's scarcity, there's certain design features that are necessary. And those design features determine very often how we use the area, or in this case, the footprint of the property and how it is lived in on the interior. Now we can flip design features and usage back and forth, but I'm putting them in this order for a reason at the moment. So scarcity affects design features. Design features affect usage, because usage affects cost. So the closer we are to the urban core, the greater the cost to live there, right? And the greater the cost to live there, because of then those areas being the job centers. So the urban cores provide the most jobs, and wherever the most jobs are is where there is a higher cost of living, because people want to be close to those jobs. So that scarcity means scarcity of space usually means buildings go up, not out, right? That's why we have 24-story buildings in urban cores and 2-story buildings in suburbs and tertiary markets. So with the scarcity of land, we build up and not out. With the scarcity of land, we determine design features that are different than we would otherwise. So it really doesn't matter if you, the renter, the resident, wants an extra large king-size bed in your one-bedroom apartment. It's very likely not going to fit in that urban core market, right? Because your usage, as much as we'd like to accommodate you, doesn't allow us to based on the cost of construction. So your usage has to change. You have to get a queen-size bed or smaller to fit in the area that's been designed for that size, because otherwise the cost increases even more. Meaning if you want a larger one-bedroom, you have to pay a higher price point. So scarcity affects design features, design features affect usage, and all of those fold into the cost. And all of those features begin in the urban core. So does anyone know what an SRO is? It really stands for single resident occupancy, SRO. Single resident occupancy. So in major areas, SROs have become commonplace for many years. It's not uncommon. But anymore, you'll see some of those units built into new development in urban and suburban markets. Number one, because we now know how to build them efficiently from how they were done in the urban core. And secondly, as the population ages, those older people are often living by themselves, and they really don't need the extra space. So an SRO that 20 years ago could only be found in an urban core market or an urban market can now be found, and we call them studios, right, in a suburban market, whereas they didn't exist before. You know, one of the things that we do with energy costs, particularly solar usage or energy usage is higher, expensive, a higher cost in urban areas, right? So more and more properties are using solar to some degree. And as that becomes commonplace, you'll begin to see more solar usage on suburban properties because it's been proven to work in a tight-knit environment, such as an urban core or an urban environment. So if it will work there, then it very likely will work in a suburban market because we have more space to work with. We have more surface space, therefore a greater opportunity to save more energy by use of solar. But the driver was the usage in the urban core area where we're attempting to do anything we can to lower our costs in a high-price environment. So whenever you're attempting to lower your costs in a high-price environment, there's innovations that occur that would not have occurred otherwise. And that innovation spreads out from the urban core to the urban area, to the suburbs, and then eventually to tertiary and frontier markets. So it's very seldom the other way around. More often than not, innovations begin in our 24-hour cities and move to the lesser populated areas over time. Those are my points for today. We covered initially why management training is important, with the first point being continuity, staying on message, and making sure that across the board we treat all of our residents, potential residents, the same. Secondly, we covered why landscaping is an asset to the property and property management. One of the reasons being it offers an aesthetic and it offers a sense of place related to the property that people can buy into. And thirdly, we covered innovation, which begins in the 24-hour cities, predominantly in the market category, starting with the urban core, and over time spreading out to the larger market. And the reason for that is a scarcity in the urban core and cost in the urban core, which requires innovation to lower those costs.
Thank you, John. What a great presentation. We do have one question. What I am going to say now, though, is that if any of you guys in the audience have any questions for John, please take advantage of that. Submit any questions you have about property management, anything that came up in this webinar that you want to expand on. The question that we do have submitted, John, is, let me pull up my questions pane here. One gentleman said that his tenant upstairs used a garden box and the entire balcony collapsed. Any suggestions on how to prevent this?
Well, I don't know the structure of the balcony, so I don't suspect it was the garden box that made the event occur. It was probably a structural issue with the balcony itself. So I would first and foremost test the other balconies to make sure that they were structurally sound across the board. And then secondly, I would limit the size of the garden box to a depth of X inches. And what I mean by that is you don't want to provide anyone with a 2 foot deep garden box, because that depth it allows for more weight from the dirt that's in there and whatever's grown. So the garden box is just that. It's supposed to be something that adds to the resident experience, but we're really not trying to grow, a season's worth of vegetables in it. So 6 to 12 inches in depth. You can have them custom made. They're just not very expensive, but you don't want them too deep because it does add to the weight. But I can't imagine even a 2 foot deep and 6 foot wide. Now let's call it 2 by 2, 2 feet by 2 feet by 6 inches long garden box. I can't imagine even one that size, which is huge, adding enough weight for the collapse of a balcony. So I would suspect structural issues with the balcony.
Okay, thanks, John. Another question we have is, what are some of the forward-looking innovations you see coming from the 24-hour cities with high probability of adoption by second and tertiary cities?
One of the ones in our recent, let me rephrase that. Here's some of the ones coming at us that you'll see, if not already, within the next 2 to 3 years. One will be a removal of carpet in exchange for some form of a laminate, because the laminate has a longer lifespan and less maintenance, not necessarily throughout the entire apartment home, but in the common areas, living room, kitchen in particular. But even when those are installed, very often they're installed to a nominal amount in the second and third story apartment homes, but on the main level they can be installed throughout because there's no sound issues underneath that. So more use of laminates because of their lifespan and not having to change it out for carpets. Another one is keyless entries, whereas locks throughout an entire development will be changed from the standard key that we're accustomed to, being able to buy at the big box home stores, to FOBs, F-O-B, or card keys, which, when that occurs, it really only works when there's on-site management, and even more so when there's 24-hour on-site management, so larger developments, because people lose their keys, et cetera, at all hours and such. So keyless entries, different types of flooring, insulation that is better than, this is with respect to new construction, insulation that was blown in across the board, meaning it's blown into every exterior wall versus just regular insulation that's laid in there, be blown in and then covered with plastic for greater energy efficiency. So those are 3 that come to mind off the top of my head. Another one is sensor lighting that is motion sensitive, versus always on. It's another energy efficient matter. I'm not so sure that it's a good idea or not, because I just like the idea of having always on lighting after dark for everyone's safety. But those are innovations that some property owners are installing to save energy.
Great.
Those are the first ones that come to mind.
Great, thank you. We have another question. This gentleman says that it's been difficult to convince property owners to go green. And do you have any suggestions?
Absolutely. You have to spell it out. Consider it a mini business plan. So you have to write, I know most everyone on this call is out of college, out of school, but you really have to just write it up as a presentation piece that reflects the numbers. So no one wants to see an essay that just is about, we should do green stuff. That doesn't get anything accomplished. But if you write a paragraph up to maybe 2 pages as to why we should do certain things that improve the environment, improve the health and safety of the property and the people that live there, and back it up with numbers reflecting the savings that are anticipated based on the changes that you're recommending, then you have a little bit more of a solid baseline for getting those owners to agree to the change. So in strictly financial terms, you can reflect it as an internal rate of return. We need you to invest, Mr. and Mrs. Investor, $7,200, but we anticipate a payback of this amount in the first 24 months, of which there's significant savings thereafter. That's one example. Another is to reflect a direct sunk cost, as an example, with efficient water heaters that have a higher initial cost but have a very short payback, depending on how they're installed, where they're installed, and the manufacturer type, and what's installed there now versus what you're taking out versus what you're putting in. Sometimes the savings can be just significant enough that there's a 1-year payback. So that's the primary way to do it, is to have it in writing, to basically present your case, but behind your short missive of presenting your case, reflecting the numbers, reflecting the dollars and cents as to why it's beneficial, not just to the property, but to the investor also.
Right, and I would just like to add to that point a little bit that tenants often really focus on the health of a home and being comfortable inside of their apartment buildings. And so if you present that as well, using non-toxic paints, having good air circulation, even installing things based on water conservation like landscape to laundry applications or solar thermal heating, these points really matter to homeowners, or to renters, I should say. And oftentimes that's a good selling point to put in for property owners, is that tenants will be comfortable with the property.
Yeah, let me give you a worst case example. It was a 400-unit deal in a Midwestern state, and it was an older property. And the issue we had was convincing the owners that it was imperative to install new thermostats within each and every unit. So we're talking about 400 units. So why would we go through this and install brand new thermostats in 400 units? Tell me why. Well, the reason why was that the vast majority of the thermostats were inoperative. So the method in which residents controlled the heat and air in their units was by opening and closing the windows.
Mm-hmm.
So if they needed less heat, they would open the window 6 inches. If they needed more heat, they would close it to being open only 2 inches, which was, just amazingly ineffective, right? I mean, it was just a significant energy gap. So that was our methodology for getting new thermostats installed, was really doing a survey of how people were treating the energy usage in their homes presently as compared to how they could do it with functional thermostats.
Right. You'd be surprised at how much just installing an operable thermostat will really cut down on the energy use, especially in larger tenancy buildings. That's a great point.
Right, particularly digital, right.
Right. Okay, we have one more question. There's a unit where the owner wants to keep the dirty old carpet. The tenants want something that is easy to clean. Any suggestions?
I wish I had a little more information, so I'll just kind of go on what I have. So let me presume that the carpet was there prior to the existing resident, so maybe it's been there too long already. I'm not sure if that's true or not in this case, but that's very often the case. And the owner wants to keep the carpet for one more turn, right? They want it to stay a little bit longer and get a little more usage out of the existing carpet. But one of the most expensive things we can do as a property manager or owner is create turnover, right? Anything we can do to maintain existing residents is very often more cost-effective than having someone move out, only so we can find another resident to replace them at a same or similar rent. So if the carpet really truly is gone, then we're going to have to replace the carpet whether that resident stays or doesn't stay. So if it behooves you to change out the carpet and keep the existing resident, then that's the right thing to do, because you're going to have to do it if they move because of the carpet, So why not do it for them, if you can? I know it's a hassle factor because changing out carpet in an occupied unit really is just an amazing hassle. So you have to make kind of a gut decision on if that's the resident you're willing and wanting to keep for whatever the reason might be. It may be that they always pay on time and they've been there for 7 years and they anticipate being there another 7 years. So, you can kind of justify the hassle factor on something like that. But, if they're a problematic resident, then you probably don't want to give them any incentive to stay anyway. So you'd probably just decline in hopes that they do move, not because they don't pay on time, but, in some cases, a particular resident isn't a good fit for the property. For whatever reason that is, we won't go into all the reasons there can be. But if it's a resident you're not interested in keeping, then you decline to change the carpet, which gives them added incentive to move. And it may well be that you want them to move because whereas you can increase rents with them staying in place for, as an example, $100, if they were to move and you put a new carpet, you may be able to increase rent to $300 and bring it up to market. So with the limited information, that's all I can think of to say that's relevant to that circumstance.
Perfect. And there's one more question regarding electrical work. So, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but the electrical work was not installed right in a condo complex so many times that the refrigerator or the microwave won't work. Are there any suggestions to contain the unit from the main condo or separate the electrical?
Oh, I don't know enough to know, but there's been instances in properties that we've run before where we basically put in a new electrical box within that unit. So we just tore it out. We, where the circuit breakers are, if there's a circuit breaker box within that unit, that's the entry point for electrical for that unit. And rather than just continue to change out circuit breakers time and again, maybe you can change out the box at a cost of $500 to $1,000 and eradicate the problem, as versus attempting to troubleshoot it any further. That may be the better cost option.
Right.
But either way, use a certified and insured electrician to determine the issue.
Great last point there, certified.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to leave the questions open for you guys. If you have any last minute questions, please keep asking them. If we can't reach or get to any of them in the time frame, I'll have John follow up in the follow-up email. But it looks like most of the questions are wrapped up for now. I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit more about rebates for your building improvements. So for multifamily property owners and managers like some of you in our audience, the Energy Network Multifamily Program is a fantastic resource. It provides significant rebates and technical assistance to help you complete energy and water upgrades to your buildings. This program offers rebates for windows, lighting, HVAC, appliances, water fixtures, and a ton of more applicable measures. And you can receive a rebate up to $1,200 per unit, which is really nice, really awesome. Some benefits include lowering operating costs, increasing property value, and like John mentioned in the part 1, improving tenant retention. I'd also like to let you guys know that this webinar was also co-sponsored by Greenpoint Rated, the leading green home certification system in California with more than 31,000 homes certified, including multifamily properties. Greenpoint Rated is a simple, affordable, and flexible rating system used by countless builders and developers, and we actually just certified a bunch of multifamily raters down in the Southern California region. It assures residents that a building is healthier, more comfortable, durable, and resource efficient. The Greenpoint Rated team is comprised of leading green building experts, and they help put together this webinar series and set the agenda for which sustainability topics are most relevant to multifamily developers and managers like you. And how lucky we were to have John Wilhut join us for this. By visiting buildagreen.org/Greenpoint Rated, you'll actually find the existing home multifamily checklist to see what kind of upgrades are factored into a Greenpoint Rated certification. Also, there are always educational events such as workshops, webinars, and trainings for you to learn more about energy and resource efficient upgrades. More information can be found, as I said, at buildagreen.org/greenpointrated. We have a few upcoming webinars I'd like to let you guys know about for any realtors in the audience, or really anyone. What you need to know when a home has a solar system is coming up June 5th. You can use this link to register. We'd love for you to join us. Robert Driscoll will be focusing on how to actually sell a home that has a solar system, how to be able to talk to your clients about that, and how to inform new home buyers as well. Additionally, part 3, the last part of John's webinar series, is coming up on June 18th, and we'd love for you to join us and come with your questions as well. You can register by using this link here. You can also go to buildagreen.org, and our events page will list all of the upcoming webinars. If you'd like to learn more about Multifamily Insight blog, please go to www.multifamilyinsight.net. Additionally, here's the website information for the Investment Network. I'd highly encourage you to go to both websites and find out a little bit more about John and maybe check into his live weekly podcast. I'd also like to thank John one last time for joining us today and offering his expertise on such an interesting topic. John, before we go, it seems like we have a few more questions. Are you able to answer those for us?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. So we have tenants that pay their rent late and have started using the land around them. Have you ever experienced this, and do you have any suggestions to curb this issue?
Well, I don't know quite what the question intends with
right, the land usage.
The land use, so maybe they can clarify that a little bit more and we can go to the next question.
Okay, that sounds good. Does demand for apartments still justify the cap rate compression being seen in the marketplace?
Well, every market is different. In too many markets, there's more cash than there are properties, and that's generally speaking when the cap rates begin to compress. So I don't know anyone other than Sam Zell that's ever been able to time the market. So I don't recommend anyone time the market. And if you're buying, I recommend that you never use any more leverage than you can live with in the long term. So what I'm saying is not to over leverage a particular transaction just for the sake of bootstrapping into it. Utilize reasonable leverage. But cap rate compression is a function of cash available, and presently there's more cash, as I shared, than there are properties in certain markets, and that's what makes for higher prices. And no, it's not sustainable.
Okay, great. And we actually got a follow-up on the previous question about using the land around them. They're actually using the land around them, tearing up the soil and storing items. And when they did a last inspection, they were making their own oil.
Interesting. I'm not sure what kind of oil, but there's 15 things wrong with this circumstance. The first one is if a resident is consistently paying late, then they need to be notified and evicted appropriately using their normal channels and using your normal legal team for doing so. So that in and of itself is a matter that can and should be remedied, irrespective of anything else that's occurring. So that's a matter of notification, right? We do the appropriate notifications for your area, and we basically do not renew the lease, and we evict the existing resident based on their pay schedule. So you just follow the norm for that city and county and go through the processes for eviction. So setting that aside, the usage of the property that is outside of the unit or unit, using land that is in and around it, in just about any circumstance, you would issue a letter by posting and by mail, certified mail, to give the parties that live there, the resident that lives there, an opportunity to remedy it, saying, stop doing what you're doing and get rid of what's there. So, and within that letter, it has to be a timeline for action. So you can't just say, hey, go do this. You have to say, go do this within, again, whatever is appropriate for your county and state or county and city, 5 working days, 10 working days, but it's not 30, 45, or 60 working days. It's just a reasonable amount of time using the reasonable man theory. How long would it take a reasonable person to get rid of a refrigerator? Well, if it's a refrigerator that's outside, a reasonable amount of time is no time, because that's a danger to any child that may be in the area, right? But if it's an old bike and a couple of tires, maybe you give them 10 days. If it's something that's growing, they seem to have a menagerie of stuff that they're collecting from garage sales, then 5 or 10 days to get rid of the stuff, put it in the garage, or get rid of it and go get storage. If it's your stuff and you want to keep it, that's fine. But if it's detracting from the value of the property, then it needs to be removed. So notification by letter, and if they do not respond, then appropriate eviction per the terms of your lease.
Great. Thank you, John. That looks like that concludes most of our questions. Again, please keep sending them in if you have more. I've left John's contact information up on this presentation slide, so in case you have any other questions, feel free to contact him or even Build It Green. We thoroughly enjoy questions from our audience. If you have more questions about the energy network, please use these contact information. David Myers is our Southern California Regional Director. He helps manage the Energy Network Multifamily Program, along with Jonathan Austin, who is our Multifamily Sales and Outreach Program Manager. If you have any questions at all about the Energy Network, about multifamily rebates and incentives, feel free to contact them. They will be able to answer any and all of your questions.
Anything else you wanted to find out about my books, I'm very easy to find on Multifamily Insight, or you can just go to Amazon.
Perfect. And I also like to let everyone know that John's third book will be coming out in the upcoming month, so please look out for that. And if you haven't read either of his two first books, please go to Amazon and purchase it. One last time, I'd like to thank John for joining us today and offering his expertise on such an interesting topic. Hopefully, we will see all of you guys at part 3 of this webinar series. We will follow this up in an email, all the presentation and the slide deck, and a recording as well. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, John.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.